3 higher ed authors, 100 plus college and university presidents, dozens of actionable insights for academic leaders. Commencement, the beginning of a new era in higher education, is now available on Amazon. Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to EdUp on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. Dr. Joe Salustio back with you on another episode here at EdUp as we pass 300. See, we all make mistakes. 550 episodes of this podcast. Today, in fact, and I didn't realize it until I was kind of doing my intro with today's guest and guest co-host, that today, as we record this episode, of course, this will be out in a week or two. It marks, though, to the day 3 years that the EdUp Experience has been around. Our first episode ever released on January 25th of 2020. So it has been exactly 3 years. Oh, guest co-host. Haven't even introduced her, but she gives me the nice woo. That's why I love having her here. Because you know what? This is, I always say it, and I've said it on social media, and you haven't believed me. That's up to you. It is your podcast. We do this for you. That's why we always capitalize you. When people go, why do you always capitalize you and your in every post that you do? It's because it's for you. It's yours. And you think, who are these idiot podcasters? Like, how does somebody like Joe, makes him so special that he does this podcast? And the answer is absolutely nothing. I don't do anything except sit on a mic and mess up basically the entire episode, which means you can do the same thing if you'd like to, and you can co-host with me any time you want. I schedule in people as soon as they raise their hand and say, I'd love to be a part of this and I want to be a co-host. I put them on. We put them on.
Do it.
Yes.
It's fun.
It is fun. You're going to get a lot out of it. You're going to make great connections. You're going to mess up along with me, and I'm going to hit buttons to make fun of you. No, I won't do that. I promise. I won't make fun of you. I'll make fun of myself mostly. But you get the point. This is for you. So come have a conversation here on EdUp. Of course, I want to say thank you to the supporters of our book that we released recently, Commencement, the Beginning of a New Era in Higher Education. It's been out for just a little over 2 months, and we've had an outpouring of support, and people have been picking up the book. Of course, the book is based on the first 125 presidents that we interviewed on this podcast. We recently passed 200 presidents that we've interviewed on this podcast. 200. So my brain's always full. I got a lot to say. Somebody else that has a lot to say is my guest co-host. You heard her say, do it. Do it. Here she is, ladies and gentlemen. Kathleen Manzo. She's Executive Vice President of Education, Labor, and Economy at Hager Sharp. Kathleen, welcome back.
Thanks. Great to be here.
What do you say to all those people that go, I feel like I could co-host, but I'm really nervous and I don't have my voice on, but should I do it? Is Joe serious? Is he going to let me on? What do you think?
Yes. There's so much expertise out there. There's so much good conversation to be had. And Joe makes it, really fun and conversational, but also the conversations go deep. So, bring it. You've got a lot to offer.
You know what, guys? There's a famous saying, and I'm going to play it for you now. And it's something I want you to think about when you get these opportunities.
Life moves pretty fast. You don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.
Anybody know where that's from? You might know. You might know. But when you get an opportunity, take it. Somebody that had an opportunity recently is our guest today. And boy, is he turning that opportunity into something really incredible. Here he is, ladies and gentlemen. He's Darren Catalano. He's CEO of Helio Campus. Darren, what's up?
Yes, thank you. And congratulations on all the success in your podcast and on your 3-year anniversary.
Thank you very much. It's been a pretty crazy ride, Darren. One of the biggest benefits is we get to talk to people like you and find out what is going on in and around higher education with companies within higher education adjacent companies. You get the point. What do we need to know? Who's doing special stuff out there? And you're doing some pretty special things. So level set for us. What is Helio Campus? Where are you? What do you do? How do you do it?
All right. Well, I think one of the most important things to understand Helio Campus is understanding our roots in higher education. So we have a very unique background in that we spun directly out of the University of Maryland system, specifically out of the University of Maryland Global Campus. And so I started in 2011 as AVP in institutional effectiveness, in the institutional effectiveness department, I should say, before my role got expanded to Vice President of Analytics, and I became the de facto Chief Data Officer for the university. And so we helped the university navigate through a period of unprecedented enrollment volatility and fiscal challenges, so much so that the Maryland Board of Regents took note at what we had done and how we helped the university go from a pretty significant forecasted operating deficit to an operating surplus. And they approved a plan to spin us off into a separate company that is now Helio Campus. So we just as well hit an anniversary. The company just became 7 years old, but that includes me, day one in co-working space, with a business plan, a little bit of money, and starting a company. And we now have 160 clients across 45 states. And if you would have told me this is where we would have been 7 years in, I would have fallen off my chair. So we're really excited about the work that we do and excited about partnering with with many institutions. And we work with, across all segments of higher ed, with community colleges, regional publics and privates, large R1 institutions, and big state systems. And we're doing really exciting work. It's like a little bit just of background, and I'm sure we'll get into it, but we have three main areas that we focus on. We focus on data analytics and data-informed decision-making, decision support within higher education. We focus on student learning, outcomes and assessment. And, we also focus on what we call financial intelligence. So deeply understanding the financial operations of the institution and, having the data to be able to do scenario planning and understand areas of investment, areas of overinvestment, and just really make sure that, we're connecting the decisions that are made at the institution with both financial and student outcomes.
That's a lot. I love it. And Darren, you probably don't know this, but Kathleen does. I download lots of sound effects to make my episodes better. And before I ask my question to you, I'm going to play a sound for myself that I download for myself.
Listen to my important question.
I press that
All right.
before I ask anything, just to set the stage. I mean, honestly, no. But you mentioned you kind of hit some buzzwords, right? Your enrollment volatility, financial challenge, financial intelligence. And then you talk about that period that you helped University of Maryland, a global campus, navigate. And I go, well, wow, those are some of the same challenges universities are experiencing right now. And particularly around financial intelligence, because that is one of the things that is getting called out. It's getting called out in the news. It's getting called out by operators. It's funny, in the book that I just wrote with Kate Colbert, it was called out as one of the missing characteristics of today's leaders in higher education is that financial acumen. Is that a challenge for the institutions that you're serving? Is it, can you back that up and say, yeah, there is a lot of, we're bringing in the intelligence to institutions, or maybe they don't know as much as they need to run a good business, and higher ed's business, right? So do we need to run it like one, and so on and so on? You get that whole conversation. What do you, give me some feedback around that?
Yeah, sure. So I think why don't we start with what is the underlying challenge, one of the challenges, I should say, for higher education, but at the most macro level, I think about the role of an institution is providing high quality education at, the most efficient way possible at the lowest cost, right? So that students can achieve, the mission of the institution is in helping students achieve their, desired career outcomes and to do it in a really the most affordable way possible. And so in order to help, help students, institutions have a fiduciary responsibility to really look at how, the financial operations of the institution, the cost of education. And so there's a lot of work that can be done there. And I think that institutions are focused on it. I think they understand this. I think they're focused on it. I think one of the differences now versus, decades ago is that, we've reached the I think there's probably recognition that we've reached the maximum point of price elasticity in higher education, that, just increasing tuition is no longer a viable strategy. And even if you are, there's a corresponding increase in your financial aid discount rates, which is offsetting, that increase. And so institutions really have to focus on how efficiently and effectively, they're running the institution to deliver their mission.
Nailed it.
Before I pass to you, Kathleen, I do want to recognize that, because that is so under discussed, is we're going to increase tuition, and, our price is going to go up, and it places us in the market. It puts us in the marketplace in this way. And, oh, by the way, we're going to increase aid on the back end so the students don't feel it. It's this game that you play. If you're in higher ed and you work for an institution, you're probably playing it right now. We all do, because it's part of the systemic part of tuition and affordability and so on. And it's really interesting, and I don't think it receives as much, scrutiny maybe as it should. And somebody that knows about bringing scrutiny to higher ed is my co-host, Kathleen, who's worked as a journalist and hired for you were there for 20 years doing stuff, weren't you, Kathleen?
Yeah, even longer than that. But, I started when I was 5.
Yikes! Go ahead.
Yeah, so really interesting stuff, Darren. And I know that colleges really rely on smart analytics and, really knowing where all the data are that they can pull together to make some of these smart decisions and programming. You talked about volatility, and then I realized you were talking about volatility 7 years ago. And I wonder how you're thinking about volatility now, hopefully toward the end of a pandemic and really significant enrollment crisis. What are some of the differences between the volatility that launched you and what you and your client institutions are dealing with now?
Yeah, sure. So if you think about the characteristics of an institution like the University of Maryland Global Campus, they are a very unique institution. They're what I would refer to as tip of the spear for higher education, in that they are very much tuition revenue dependent. They early on, they were early in distance learning and online learning. They focus on, the success for adult learners and those that are gonna, have already started a career. And so they're very, kind of powerful and unique institution. And working there was just eye-opening for me of the challenges that face higher ed. When we, I think the broader, as a broader society, when we think of higher education, we think of the top 5%. We think of the Ivies, we think of the flagship publics, but that is not representative of the larger higher education ecosystem. And there's so many regional publics and privates, community colleges. When I first started working in higher education, I didn't know a lot about community colleges, and they're the gem of higher education. So I think there's a lot of different types of institutions. And so our experience at UMGC was really, I think, indicative of the challenges that institutions face today. We were just kind of tip of the spear. And so what you see is that some of those challenges have, flown through. You got reduced state appropriations and state support. You got enrollment volatility. You have cost pressures, not only driven from the pandemic, but on, kind of pensions, retirement funds, benefits, insurance, everything. And so it all just comes together, and it is, it makes for a somewhat precarious, kind of situation for many institutions. And I know there's a lot of surveys out there, and if you, we could reference them, but many colleges and universities, will acknowledge their financial constraints and that they're struggling with that long-term institutional change. And I could go into more detail, but just a little bit of my initial thoughts there.
You can't handle the truth.
It's the truth.
That is very true. It is very true. I think, most institutions have to take a hard look at, kind of the underlying economics of the institution. We're not saying they have to be for-profits. We're not saying they have to run like a business, but just like any nonprofit, they have to make sure their, revenues match or exceed their expenses, and it can, and that can happen for many years in the future. And that's what we refer to as financial sustainability.
If you look at the three things that you talked about when you first started, you said data analytics, student learning outcomes, and financial intelligence, kind of the three areas that you're serving higher ed. Which one of those are you serving institutions with the most? Is that the right way to even ask that? I'm not sure. Which one of those areas are institutions coming to you for the most? Where the biggest challenges are?
Yeah, sure. So it's pretty evenly distributed. Our biggest, it's by client count. It's on the financial intelligence side, and on the kind of depth of engagements, it's probably on the data analytics and student learning side. And so what I think you see, let me kind of take a step back and kind of our thesis on really how we're approaching higher education, how we work with our institutions. And we kind of built the company around what we call institutional effectiveness 2.0. And really what this is it's really a more unified approach to decision making, providing institutions with the opportunities to better align investments with the financial and student learning outcomes. And really it's a kind of a comprehensive approach towards continuous improvement, evaluating their operations. So these three areas are very much related. And in fact, it's they are best done in an integrated way. And so the way that we think about this is you have to just start with, do we have the right academic programs to deliver on the career outcomes and expectations for our students? Are those programs and departments financially sustainable? The flip side of that is if we're delivering on the academic mission, are we running the institution in an efficient and effective way as such that we can deliver on this mission to our students and do it in the most affordable way for them? And then the third piece is, of course, the most important, are we constantly and continuously and rigorously measuring student learning so that it informs our curriculum, it informs how we support the students, and it informs our overall strategic planning of the at the institution. So they are very different. They are related. I would say there's areas that are that every institution wants to focus on student success and driving enrollment. There are kind of less institutions that are focused, as we talked about earlier, maybe on the financial operations of the institution, and there's even less that really want to dive deep into the sustainability of the academic programs and departments and understanding how they're meeting student expectations. But that's the hard work that needs to be done.
That's a great answer, and you speak so well. I'm going to take a step back.
Now it's your turn.
That was to you, Kathleen.
Good, because I was going to jump in here. When you talk about student learning, it really gets me, thinking about a lot of things. I worked at Education Week for 22 years, covering the K-12 system, but also pathways to higher ed, generally from an access and opportunity perspective. And I was also at Community College Week a long time ago, but I agree with you that they are the gem of higher education. And also diverse issues in higher education, way back. But it brings me to, kind of the questions of, student learning. I know the big issues right now are equity, opportunity, meeting students where they are, which comes across in a lot of the marketing for these institutions. But how do you work with your clients, colleges and universities, to address that? We're talking about people, we're talking about students. Certainly there have been an array of untraditional kinds of needs during the pandemic to help students persist. And, and do well. How are you talking to universities about the ways they can use these kinds of tools and analytics to really focus on students as individuals?
Yeah, I mean, great question. Thank you for setting it up. Let me answer it a couple of different ways. First, I think we have to acknowledge that, when we're talking about student success and equity and all the things that are really top of mind in higher education today, it's really recognition of, the journey for students is highly complex, right? The work that we're doing to try to understand student learning and what are the factors that of why students persist and why some students don't. It is highly complex, and we're missing. We have kind of like blind spots in the data, and that may sound funny coming from a company that sells data analytics to higher education institutions, but we acknowledge it up front. I have a twin brother who's an airline pilot, and you could run models on airplane engines to understand when they're going to fail in advance because it's machine data, and you can very accurately predict what are the circumstances of which an engine's going to fail. Well, you can't do that in higher education, right? Predicting student or human behavior is so much more complex, and we have a lot of missing data that we don't know. We don't, the life happens, their kind of engagement on campus. We try to find proxies for it, but a lot of times we don't have, good proxies. So I just want to acknowledge that up front. And, during my career, I've always chased this elusive concept of what we call learning or learner analytics, right? They're two different competencies, but, related. And one of the things that I've come to kind of realize is, kind of the student learning outcomes assessment is really the critical missing piece that I think we haven't focused on nearly enough. And so that's an area that Hilo Campus is really invested in, is student learning outcome assessment. And really, to do those assessments, it starts at the most atomic level, right? We, as faculty and program chairs, we need to start with having really well-defined course learning objectives, program learning objectives, and institutional learning objectives. And then we have to map those objectives. So if we start at the course level, hey, here are the learning objectives for the course. And we're going to map these learning objectives to pieces of content, and then we're going to map those learning objectives to assessments so that we can understand in course during the term if students are kind of meeting those learning objectives, and if they're not, how do we refine our curriculum or add additional content? And that kind of builds from there. At a more macro level, another thing that we are very passionate about and working on is this, not only defining student learning outcomes, but how do you map those to skills and then show the student how those skills qualify them for various occupations and career outcomes. And, if you guys are both familiar, an area that we are working on and putting a lot of time and effort and money into is the comprehensive learner record, if you're familiar. And that's really the alternative skills-based transcript set in layman's term and short form.
You know that the world of higher education is experiencing evolutions and revolutions. You want to be part of the progress. Commencement, the beginning of a new era in higher education with insights from more than 100 college and university presidents, will show you how. Get your copy of Commencement, the beginning of a new era in higher education now on Amazon right away. We think you're going to love it. It's
amazing.
There's a lot there. Kathleen, you asked one doozy of a question, and there's so many elements and layers to that answer. Love it. What do we think, Darren, about that alternative pathways? I don't know, growth of alternative pathways, the value of a degree. I ask every guest about this. I mean, the value of the degree is in question where, maybe it's not the value of the education itself, but it's the ROI on that education. But it comes down to what is the value of a college degree, and is there alternative pathways, and can I get there faster? Can I hack my way? I just literally wrote something recently about hacking higher ed. And there's ways. Yesterday I saw YouTube actually just release an announcement in conjunction with Arizona State University that they're going to be offering videos for credit that you can then articulate to Arizona State and other universities. And so everybody's kind of getting into the game to kind of either shorten the time constant of time or shorten the cost. And one of the hacks is alternative credentialing, and it's very confusing, right? How do you take this credential? What does this credential mean? Does it have value? Who's looking? Who's judging? How am I putting it? Where am I putting it? There's just a lot of confusion. Are you seeing that from institutions who are even wrestling with the concept?
I think everyone is trying to figure out what the right formula is. And let me start by, I am certainly not someone predicting the demise of higher education. I believe that higher education has great staying power and will persist in perpetuity. I'm certainly not, one of those people that are predicting, kind of doom and gloom for higher ed. But just like every other industry, higher education needs to adapt. Certainly, the fact that the cost of college has tripled over the last 20 years, causes a lot of concern. And that's why you see that, people questioning the value of higher education because the cost went up, and so when the cost goes up, the stakes are just so much higher. So even I graduated in the late 90s, and, even then, the college was much more affordable. And if it took you an extra semester or things didn't work out, it just wasn't as big of a risk. And now it is. And so, I'll first talk about, kind of the affordability. I do think there are, it depends on what you want out of college. If you want to go to a flagship, state public institution and have those 4 or 5 years of that college experience, or you want to go to an Ivy League, you're going to pay a premium. If you want to get a degree, there are very affordable pathways to do it. You could take AP credits, go to community college, and then transfer in to, your public flagship institution. You could do it in a much more affordable way. So there are pathways, for you to get it. And my personal perspective is that I do not believe that, kind of alternative credentials are replacements for degrees. I think they are complementary to degrees. And I do think for the institutions that we are working with, I think they view it that way as well. And if you look at, many of the credentials that are being awarded, they're being awarded to students who already have undergraduate degrees. And so I'll tell you where I see the best use, the best use of credentials, I think is where it augments the degree. And so I look at the humanities, and we hire a lot of staff, and we hire client services staff, data engineers, data scientists, software developers, account managers, sales staff. And one of the things that I will tell you is I will hire a student from who graduated from the humanities any day of the week. What they really need to do, though, is augment their degree with a technical credential. So I believe a student who graduates with the humanities and has a technical credential to augment that is extremely marketable and valuable to many employers. And so that's how I see the two fitting together. But I want to acknowledge that no one's figured out the magic formula here, and it's certainly something that many institutions are focused on.
I like your style, dude.
Kathleen, over to you.
Yeah, so one thing that kind of drew my attention to the story of Helio Campus is, your start at UMUC, it's pretty rare that, solutions of really any variety are brought to scale. And it seems like you've found a way to bring these tools and these solutions to scale. And I wonder, what's the story behind that? How challenging is it to, bring some of these programs and products to, kind of the masses and really make that kind of impact more broadly than, your perhaps modest start?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I'll start with my, kind of answer the question as I transitioned into higher education, and I had worked as a consultant at the College Board. I worked at Rosetta Stone, which is a language learning, company, and that's where I first started with this concept of, mining product logs and usage data for learning analytics and learner analytics. So even before I joined higher education, I'd always kind of had some experience in education, whether it be, kind of on the SAT side or, kind of in, kind of alternative, now we call it, kind of alternative education. And so one of the things when I joined higher education, and I joined in, kind of like the IR space, right, institutional research space. And when I joined, I remember kind of coming in and how, all my peers at different institutions would, tell me how every institution is so unique and different. But from an outsider perspective coming into higher education, I looked at it and said, this is the most homogenous industry I've ever worked in. Despite the differences, and every institution is unique and different in, kind of, in certain ways, but from an underlying business model, from an underlying data perspective, from an underlying systems perspective, if you think about the systems colleges use to capture this data, there's, it's very homogenous. And so,
You were serious about that?
Yeah, one of the, kind of, thesis for starting Helio Campus is that, every institution is unique and different, but from a data perspective and from the types of analyses that institutions need to focus on, it's much more homogenous than you would originally think.
Makes a lot of sense, and it's really interesting to hear that perspective, because I think that I think like any industry, you think it's very, complicated. One of the more complicated things that's, and I brought this up too, the president of DeVry University, who came from tech. I interviewed him recently. He came from running angel investors in tech and whatever. And I said, wow, higher ed is just so complex, from a regulatory, see, I mess up all the time, regulatory, say that 10 times fast, standpoint. And he goes, you know what? So is half the U.S. economy. And but we always look at it from kind of an ethnocentric point of view, that it's about me and it's about where I am and it's this. But to your point, it is hard to predict human behavior, but that is what other industries are trying to do, right? Everybody's trying to do that. I mean, you ever bought something on Amazon, sometimes even said something out loud, and all of a sudden it's popping up on Instagram? I don't know who's listening in your house. But the point is, we're all trying to predict human behavior, whether it's for buying or selling or moving or, it's all, but we do use some of the same systems in higher ed. There isn't a lot of system variance, especially when it comes to student information systems. There's only so many choices. It's a complicated business because of the protection of student data, but there's protection of consumer data. So your point's just really, and I'm kind of soapboxing a little bit, but I wonder if we get too caught up in our own stuff to see outside of the box. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, one of the things that I appreciate about, working in higher education is that it's very, there's great communities and they're more than willing to share with each other. And I do think that there's a lot that institutions can learn from each other. And, at Helio Campus, one of the things that I'm most proud of is, just the range of institutions that we support. And there's a lot that a flagship public institution can learn about student success from a community college. And there's a lot that a community college can learn from a flagship public institution or even a selective private institution about how to around the financial and operations of the institution. So I think there's a lot that that institutions can learn from each other. But in order to kind of like do that, you have to open up to their perspective of saying, yes, we're all unique and different, but there's a lot we could learn from each other, and kind of have that perspective versus kind of a proclivity, as you were kind of alluding to, of we're very unique and different to the extent that the experiences of others really don't inform our path forward. So I think it's a cultural shift and a mindset that you have to have. And I think if you do, you could really take advantage of, a lot of learnings from your peers.
100%.
Kathleen, back over to you for any final questions you have for Darren before we give him the final two.
Yeah, so I'm going to try and be cool and up to the minute and ask, what are your thoughts about the Chat GPT debate? And, seems like there might be lots of opportunities for companies like you and also higher ed, but also maybe a lot of challenges.
Yeah, well, I would tell you, I'm a big fan of Chat GPT. I think it's nascent in its early stages, so we have to be very careful. But, when I look at right now, if you're an educator or school or whatnot, there's a lot of fear about, kind of, Chat GPT and its uses, and it's rightfully so. As it's come on the scene, we have to react very quickly, and there is real concerns about academic integrity and cheating, that have to be addressed. So I want to acknowledge that up front, and that is no small task. Longer term, I think, kind of these technologies need to be embraced. And I think there's going to be a forcing function for how courses and subjects are taught. So no longer can, if a student can ask ChatGPT to write it an 8-page essay on to argue for affirmative action, and that program can generate those 8 pages in 30 seconds, then maybe that's not the best way going forward, to structure assignments.
Well, let's start the insanity.
So you have to focus. It's kind of like maybe perhaps if you guys are familiar with the flipped classroom concept, where hey, a lot of that work needs to be done in the classroom, and a lot of the project work and capstone projects, and I think there's different mechanisms of which we can overcome this and kind of embrace it as part of the curriculum. Look at it as, kind of the calculator, the graphing calculator of the future. And I think it's going to take some time for everything to settle in, but at a macro level, I think the technology should be embraced. And I think it's going to be a forcing function for, kind of like how we teach, how we structure curriculum. And I think it's going to be a good thing.
If you guys don't know this, and maybe you do, so at one point, one of my colleagues asked me to interview ChatGPT. So I asked it a bunch of questions. I don't know what episode it was, 540, maybe 543.
How did I miss that?
I don't know, but the picture of the graphic is like a little robot face. And I asked it all questions about higher ed and, are you taking over the jobs? Are you, how do we better use GPT? And then I put the answers in a text to voice program, put a voice on it, and then it responds to my questions and I splice them together. Right. Actually, believe it or not, ChatGPT is calling in right now with an answer to if ChatGPT is trying to take over the world.
It's all part of the plan.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. It's nobody could say better. No, but honestly, it's that's the way some people feel, right? To your point, Darren, is just a great fear. What happened when the internet happened, and what happened when you couldn't go to Blockbuster to get your video and you had to go to the mail to get a DVD? I mean, ooh, those days of walking to the mail. So we have to embrace it. But to your point, the way that learning could evolve, because you can't just ask somebody to write a paper anymore, is going to be interesting. That's the most fascinating part. How are we going to evolve the learning process so it's not just all write a paper on X versus Y when an AI can do it, right?
Yep, you got it.
Well, we like to, Kathleen, any others you want to slide in?
No, I'm still mulling over that. I can't wait to listen to that episode.
It's all part of the plan.
And ChatGPT again, just to make sure you heard for the first time. No, but honestly, Darren, we really appreciate it. And you speak so well about higher ed, the future. You probably have incredible insights from the institutions that you're working with that help you foretell that future. And we want to ask you two final questions. Number one, what did we not say about Helio Campus that you would like to say? Anything going on, new product releases, new partners, somewhere you're speaking? Basically take our audience, plug your product in the work that you're doing because we want to celebrate it. And then number two, tell me what you think the future of higher education is going to look like.
All right. Well, I'll start with, going back to kind of how we started the conversation, which is, I think we have agreement, at least among the three of us, that there needs to be increased focus on the financial operations and financial sustainability of higher education. I think the pandemic really highlighted that. So one of the areas that we invested in and our newest product that we launched is our financial modeling product. So this is it's not a budgeting tool, it's something very different. It is focused on long-range financial planning, for lack of better terms, focused on developing different scenarios, right? So it's, helping institutions understand, well, if state appropriations do this, kind of gift giving does this, investment income does that, enrollments do this, costs do that, what happens? And how does that impact the liquidity, change in net assets for the institution and the overall financial health of the institution, and allows them to look downfield. Sometimes it's hard because we focus on what's right in front of us, but one of the things that we are focused on in this tool is being able to look downfield multiple years and compare different scenarios to help your kind of strategic and longer term planning versus just the year, the upcoming fiscal year. And to the latter point, about the what's to come of higher education, if I knew, I would be much more successful than I am, and I could give you a great answer. What I would say is I expect, going back to I'm a big believer in higher education and its staying power. I do think that the industry will rise to the occasion, and I do think it will iterate and it will change. And I think there are more market forces and internal and external forces that are going to accelerate the pace of change. And just in general, I don't know what that's going to look like, but I've complete confidence that the industry will rise to the occasion and do what's right for their students and for the mission of their institution.
Well said, my friend. Wow. This has been a great conversation. I know I speak for Kathleen when I say that. So interesting. And there's so much we probably didn't talk about, like data analytics and how are institutions using this data and how are they not using the data? I mean, that could be a whole nother conversation. So we'll have to have a part two probably with you, Darren. But alas, I have a day job that I have to go do. They are very supportive of the podcast, by the way, Lindenwood University.
I thought it was a snow day, Joe.
Well, it's a snow day, but we work. You know how it goes. My kids get to go outside. I get to watch them. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest co-host today, you know her, you love her. She's Kathleen Manzo. She's Executive VP for Education, Labor, and Economy at Hager Sharp. Kathleen, thank you for coming back.
Thank you.
It's always a pleasure to have you, by the way. And you're welcome back anytime.
Here. Thank you.
All right. And our special guest today, he's Darren Catalano. He's CEO of Helio Campus, and he's doing great work. And I ask everybody to follow Darren, check it out, check out Helio Campus and the work that they're doing. Darren, did you have a good experience here on EdUp today?
I absolutely did. Thank you so much. I appreciate the invitation.
Anytime, my friend. Ladies and gentlemen, you've just EdUp'd. It's time to level up. The beginning of a new era in higher education begins with you. Order your copy of Commencement, The Beginning of a New Era in Higher Education by Kate Colbert, Dr. Joseph Lucio, with contributions by Elvin Freitas. It's higher education's must-read book of 2022. Discover how you can seize the moment to change higher education forever. Commencement, The Beginning of a New Era in Higher Education, now available on Amazon. For bulk orders, contact Kate, Joe, or Elvin